This terrible day started with an unremarkable rain. Peppa and George were waiting for the rain to end so they could go outside to play. They did not yet know how this day would turn out. They waited for the sun to come out and asked their parents if they could go for a walk. When they left the house, they found puddles left by the rain and started to jump in them, as they had done many times before. However, that day they decided to try to find the biggest puddle. They walked further and further away from home. They went so far that their parents could no longer see them. George saw a big puddle and wanted to jump in it, but Peppa stopped him. She wanted to make sure the puddle was safe enough for him, but she didn't think about her own safety. That was the worst mistake of the day. Her whole body sank into the puddle. A nose was barely visible on the surface of the puddle from the recently cheerful pig. George couldn't contain his horror and started to cry. He realized that help was needed as soon as possible. He could hardly remember the way home and ran in the random direction. After some time, he did not notice a puddle under his feet and fell into it himself. He was pulled up to his waist in mud. He couldn't get out no matter how hard he tried, but the upper half of his body was free. All he could do was scream and call for help from the puddle. Because George had run too far away from his parents, they couldn't hear him. An hour after Peppa Pig and her brother went for a walk, Mummy Pig started to worry. She talked about it with Daddy Pig, and they went out to look for their children. After 20 minutes of searching, they reported their children missing. After that, every resident started looking for Peppa and George. The search lasted for several hours, and even helicopters were involved. George was the first to be spotted by Daddy Pig, who heard faint cries for help, approached, and saw him. George was in a state of hypothermia. He had caught a cold from the damp and was exhausted. Daddy Pig pulled him out and tried to find out where Peppa was. George himself has slurred speech due to his age, but because he had been in the mud for several hours, all that could be understood from his speech was that something terrible had happened to Peppa. Then George slowly started walking in one direction. He stopped at the same puddle where Peppa got stuck. There was nothing on the surface of the puddle, as there were no footprints nearby. Since then, no one likes to jump in muddy puddles anymore.